Right, now to our team coverage on the broken system. The country is facing its biggest hurdle yet.
The country, of course, from corrupt politicians, failing institutions and a crippled judiciary, has a system that has been held at ransom or to ransom by individuals who pull the strings of impunity.
Now, Zainab Ismail takes a look at the capture of the state by cartels running the show.
Well, thank you, Mark and Smriti. Now, analysts place the amounts lost to graft between 600 and 800 billion shillings annually. Now, this is through the reckless plunder of public resources through outright theft and manipulation of procurement procedures for selfish gain. And although there have been efforts to curb this menace, there still is so much more that needs to be done. Here's a report I filed earlier on. When news broke of how former Cabinet Secretary Rashid Echesa, now a civilian, allegedly walked into top offices in the country to negotiate a military arms deal with selfish interests, the country stood in awe and shock. This is a classic case of how graft cartels and tenderpreneurs have infiltrated the system. Perhaps now a clear manifestation of the words of former Chief Justice Willie Mutunga.
Basically serious cartels that are involved in terrorism, money laundering, corruption, counterfeit, and it does control, the various arms of the state, and that's a fact.
It is indeed a gangster's paradise. From NYS to Anglo Leasing and the Kenya Pipeline, the scandals too many to list. In his book, Betrayal of Public Trust, former Lands and Education Cabinet Secretary Professor Jacob Kaimenyi paints a picture of the workings of cartels. He writes, "They wanted me to award the multi-billion shilling tender to supply laptops to Standard One pupils to a politician. In return, the politician offered to reward me handsomely, offering a generous share of the money as kickback." The multi-agency team comprising the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, the Directorate of Criminal Investigations and the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions have become the face of war on graft. But despite the efforts, the country continues to battle masked ghosts, pulling the strings of impunity from the dark.
When I was being interviewed by JLAC, I told them I have a skin of a rhino. These kind of intimidations, I'm from the military. I've seen worse thing than these funny threats, but it affects my junior staff. They're intimidated, they get disturbing SMS, but the plan is what I was telling you, is just trying to scare somebody not to investigate a case. So we have to address the slow judicial process. What is the general caliber of the politician that we elect? We've seen the kind of politician we are dealing with, some of them. And people blame and say the EACC is not working, or this government is corrupt. It is what you have planted. Quite a number of these people, not all, but some of them, you even doubt, were they elected or they were imposed? People are out there, it's a culture now, people are out there to go and get a political position to go and eat.
President Uhuru Kenyatta declared corruption a national security threat in 2015. On several occasions, he has backed with fearsome venom. But it is the lack of a bite that leaves many questioning his commitment.
Mnataka nifanye nini jameni? That I have not done.
Well, Mr. President, reclaiming the country is a proverbial 1,000,000-to-1 shot, but someone has to take that shot. All right, well, the outright disregard for governance policies and law doesn't just extend, or rather it extends beyond just financial misappropriation to practically every sector of the country. And I know my colleague Silas Apollo has been taking a look at some of these cases. Silas?
Yes, Zainab, rightly as you said it, whether it is in the transport, education or health sector, those in authority and Kenyans at large just can't seem to follow rules and spirit and letter of the law. a classic case of chaos that has led to loss of life and left a brittle society in the brink of anarchy. Take a look.
Some years back, a young man, then newly married, rushed his wife to one of the country's leading private hospitals. And while doctors were able to save the life of Norbert Wakisa's wife, that decision would prove costly, quite literally. The hospital not only charged him more than the agreed amount, but also confiscated his title deed as insurance. Wakisa's story would become the face of the plight of patients at the Nairobi Women's Hospital, where managers were accused of fleecing patients for big profits. But the hospital has been cleared of wrongdoing.
Kila mara huwa wananipigia simu wakiniambia, hii pesa unalipa kwa mwezi ni kidogo sana. Lazima ujaribu kando na hii 10,000, utafute pesa ingine umalize hii deni.
Wakisa's story was a snapshot of what many go through, albeit in silence, in a system that has turned to eating its own. A society where decorum, moral values and the rule of law no longer hold. Instead, chaos and anarchy are the new order.
When you look at us today, government positions are supposed to be for enriching us. When the government positions are supposed to be for public service, umejitolea kusaidia wananchi wa Kenya, but we go there to get rich.
And it is not only the powerful that are to blame. Even the common man has become part of the rot. For instance, the unruly borders and the larger public transport system was disobedient for basic traffic regulations are leaving Kenyans dead.
That group of fellow Kenyans has become unruly in an unbelievable manner. In certain parts of the country, it operates like a mafia. Someone is involved in an accident, hits a border, and they all come and burn the car without even listening to what was happening.
Then there is a political class whose apathy for order and disregard for court orders is appalling. We elected them, but they are now shooting us in the neck, robbing us of money and property, and punching walls in myopic protestations.
We really need to put the people of Kenya first as our country. We need to lift the people's consciousness. We need to stop side shows.
So broken is the country's governance system that a 2016 survey found that most young people did not care how they got rich as long as they avoided jail. More than a third said they would easily give or take a bribe. These are the psalms of anarchy.
Yes, now this self-minding mentality has been perpetuated by the age-long curse of tribalism. Lois Wangoya has been unpacking the deadly effect of negative ethnicity in the country. Lois?
Indeed, Silas, the problem of negative ethnicity is one that has seen Kenya pay the ultimate price. Back to that fateful day in the year 2007 when all hell broke loose and an orgy of bloodletting led to the death of thousands and displaced even more. Yet, our politics still feeds on this very vice like a parasite. Take a look at my reports. Kilometers from Eldoret town is Kiambaa. Violence of 2007-2008. Naomi Ngendo, aged 35 years then, took her grandmother and her children to seek refuge in the safest and most sacred place they could find in the midst of the fire engulfing the area, the KAG church. But ethnicity and tribalism, fueled by greed for power, had quickly shredded that long-held belief and unraveled the yarn that held up the social fabric.
Mamati zenye tulikuwa tumelalia hiyo siku ya 31st wakaanza kuisanya kwa mlango na hapo ndio waliakishia.
The 2007-2008 disputed election had propelled the entrenchment of bad politics, turning against brothers. Lives were lost, including Ngendo's kin.
Nilinama tu hivi, nikaona penye iko mwanya. So hapo ndio niweza kupita, nikakuta wamama wamelaliana. Mimi wakati nikanyanga wamama nikaanguka, nikaroll. So wakati nilikuwa nachomoka hivi nje ndio nikasikia sasa ni masikio imechomeka. Kumbe kukuja kuangalia mbele nikakuta ni mkono ilishikwa kidogo na hiyo moshi nikatoka. na niko na mtoto ndio nilikuwa nazuia sasa nilikuwa nazuia kichwa isichomeke. Na msichana wangu naye alikuwa na mtoto. Yeye wakati alikuwa anataka arukishie mtoto wake kwa dirisha, unajua sasa mtu anang'ang'ana tu penye atatoka. Mtoto akafunguka leso ikakasijuni kukatika ama ili nini. Yeye akaweza kuruka, mtoto akarushwa nje na watu. Akachukua mtoto wake na kuenda akatorokea Langas police station.
40-year-old Grace Mukiri escaped with her life and saved those of her 2 children. She, however, is still traumatized by her inability to save her niece who burnt to death in the fire.
Unajua ni heri ile kitu huku na usikiange alikuwa na aliteketea, lakini sasa ile yenye unaangalia wewe mwenyewe na unaona na umejaribu kung'ang'ana na ukawa umeshindwa kuokoa, unajua kitu haiwezi toka kwa kichwa yako ama kwa roho yako.
Her niece's death was just the beginning of more tribalism-fueled deaths here.
Alikatwa hivi. Nikiona na wakashika hivi wakaangusha tu hivi na nyuma. Wakachukua masagari wakawekelea na wakapiga kiberiti. Ndio nikauliza kweli, yani kabisa mnaua mtu hivyo?
Such traumatic events would be recorded in different parts of the country as politicians fought for power in 2008, and that trend did not end with the end of the violence. Even in the relative calm, it has been the norm for Kenyans and political leaders included. Currently, political temperatures are slowly and surely rising in the country, with the tribal card being dropped with near reckless abandon in the current political arena.
Liwe ni jambo la kuogopa tunapoona watu ambao hawana hatia walilala makaburini na sasa tunataka kuelekeza pale. Mambo haya yote yameletwa na uhasama ambao umetolewa na chuki na maneno katika mikutano.
In the meantime, Kenyans are scared of the ongoing political developments in the country characterized by tribalism.
Kiangalia kama Uhuru na Raila kweli wanafurahia mambo ya BBI. Ruto sasa ako kivyake. Sasa tunashindwa tena kutakuwa aje. So tuko na hofu sana.
Liz Wangoi, NTV, Kiamba, in the county of Uasin Gishu. Bad manners transcend negative ethnicity to as close as your own home, where the family unit is first disintegrating. Oko Okosa looks at our moral conscience or the lack of it. Oko?
Well, Lois, the big question is, do we really aspire to any moral values as a people? What with cases of murder being on the rise, more so within the family unit, and sexual offenses being committed like sport, even to young innocent ones, in a society where it appears morals have been thrown out of the window. Here is my report on solid fabric. It was perhaps a mother's worst nightmare, caught in real time. She walked in on a 13-year-old daughter being defiled.
Nikaanza kuitana, hakuna mwenye alinitikia. Nikajaza na akili niende kwa hii landi, saa zingine ako kwa hiyo landi na mtu mwingine. Kuenda nikasikia mwenye anapiga kelele na nafunika mdomo. Nikatembea polepole, nikaingia hapo, nikapata huyo mtu kanalala na yeye.
The grade 4 pupil had been in this situation before. Twice she had been defiled, lured by men much older than her, men who ideally should have been her protectors, but who instead turned into her tormentors.
Mara ya kwanza nilikuwa lodge. Niko nenda kwa toilet, akaniita. Akanipea pesa. Nikasema niingie ndani, nitoe nguo, akalala na mimi. Mara pili nilikuwa funakwa mjenga draw. Yeye akaniita kwa hiyo nyumba. Akanambia nitoe nguo, akanipea pesa, akalala na mimi.
The girl who has since dropped out of school is now 6 months pregnant, yet none of the 3 men who robbed her of her innocence have been apprehended, despite a report being made at Ojola police post.
Kitu kingine nilifanyika, mtu ni mgonjwa. Sasa tulimpeleka usi, wakapata virusi ziko chini, wakampea dawa ya kukinga.
The perpetrators of the heinous act are well known to the girl's family, just like in many other cases reported across the country. Surveys conducted over the years have revealed that thousands of Kenyan children who are nursing lifetime scars of defilement have been harmed by the same people supposed to protect them. Social scientist Wycliffe Kigan attributes this to what he describes as collapsed social systems.
There is a rapid social change going around the world. It's happening at an unprecedented pace, actually, that everyone is being affected, including the social systems and social institutions. Look, for example, a family, is the main socializing agent, but it has been caught up with this social change and is actually destabilized completely. Look at religion, destabilized completely. Look at education, is going through a lot of turbulence. And these are the systems that were put in place by society to do what? To do what we call social control.
But Kigan is still optimistic that the solid moral fabric can still be salvaged a stitch at a time.
One of the best way to prevent is really to understand, to come up with facts, truth studies, and then proper social planning to set systems that will give a backup to the vulnerable in the society.
Oukokusa, NTV. Now, in all this, the response of Kenyans who should be demanding better remains classic. My colleague Brenda Wanga has been exploring the psychological effects of the ills bedeviling the country on Kenyans. Brenda?
Well, yes, Okusa. They say that laughter is the best medicine and that it may even add a few more days to your life. Well, if that is the case, then Kenyans are on the right track to long life. After all, we have perfected the art of seeing the funny in just about any situation, pleasant or grim. But is the laughter genuine, or does it mask much more? Here's my report on how we are surviving in an otherwise broken system.
It doesn't matter whether it's issues of graft cases in courts or the poison in our food. Trust Kenyans to turn the heavy into the light, quite literally. But the banter shared over the internet masks a more serious and grave situation.
We are in problems, but how do we cope? We make fun out of it. But that fun is the opposite of mourning. It's some kind of displacement, so to speak, some kind of fixation, so to speak, some kind of hedonism, avoiding pain.
Indeed, it would appear that the country is in the grip of collective trauma, which is defined as traumatic psychological effects shared by a group of people of any size, up to and including an entire society. Kenyans have over time experienced events that fit this bill.
Systems in the country are not working to the expectations of the people, and they have, in a sense, lost hope.
From the high fatality road accidents to building collapses to post-election violence, the list is long and indeed littered with hundreds of corpses. This event's usually the result of the collapse of the country's governance systems, situations that in other countries will see the citizenry demand answers and accountability from those in power. In Kenya, the reaction is usually predictable. Anger, sorrow at times, memes, and as has become standard response, move on, or in street talk, bora uhai.
How long are we going to be patient? How long are we going to be comical about tragic events? And our political and economic and policy leaders have to actually start thinking about remedying this situation.
The lack of faith in getting the systems to work and a litany of stressful events is what makes Kenyans latch onto the scarce sprinklings of good news.
Those are anecdotal events that raise our happiness for a moment. Then we relapse back into our sadness. We have no chance of maintaining these moments, these events that make us happy. Every day we have politicians.
In the midst of all this, the political class, the ones on whose shoulders the responsibility of making the society's leadership better or worse appear content with the status quo. After all, bora uhai.
This is a call for reflection, a call for each one of us to search our souls for what part we play in breaking the system. Dan Mwangi put together this spoken word piece.
They say mirror keeps you awake, ukiichana. Well, so does the mirror. Ukichana, nywele, you may lose your peace or see how dreadful we are, and that yaliyopita kweli ni ndwele. We throw stones like it was a biblical Steve, yet stone-cold hearts we wrestle with. We label it less of sin. We want to fix others, but will not fix ourselves. We want to bring them to book, but will not fix our shelves. We are guilty, but are not among those who feel ourselves. A false sense of righteousness, the gist of how we feel ourselves. The least I can tell, these dreams in our heads, these are cartels. The system is broken, and we all have mallets in our hands. If you know, you know. And if not, I'll help you understand. We rumble about the crumbles, yet we put our best foot forward. As we cause the stumbles, we sing, how great thou art, then draw knives at each other, brother on brother, daughter on mother, son on father, name it. And speaking of names, you give preference on account of tribe. Caught on the wrong? Well, you give a bribe. We scream and write about and against corruption to the letter, but throw out conscience as fast as we do with that litter. Lost integrity. You vowed to fidelity, but now have bowed to the woo of that with which you are not endowed. Our integrity is sometimes almost like the mirage of kids with laptops. And we don't get over the top when we overlap. Stop. We are part of the problem. We must be part of the solution, but we must first realize we are dissolved in the dirty waters of the broken sewer, the broken system. It's a wrap.
Well, we also sought your thoughts as Kenyans on the broken system. This is what some said.
Tunafanya kuona mambo yanaendelea, yani kuna wizi mwingi tu unaendelea katika serikali. Na sisi huku chini twaumia, hatuna kazi, hatuna hela ya kufanya biashara. Maisha magumu kweli.
Sifurahii kabisa. Hata heri siku za Kibaki ama siku za Moi mwenye ametuacha juzi. Lakini siku hizi viongozi hakuna chochote wanafanya.
Vile naona nchi inaendezwa, haendeshi kwa njia iliyo mzuri. Haswa nataka kuangazia mambo ambayo yanaendelea kule Nairobi. Kaunti ya Nairobi sielewi mwelekeo inaendelea wapi. Ndio hata pia natupatia figa ya Kenya mzima tunaenda namna gani. Fisadi pia umekidi.
Waswahili walisema umleavyo mwana ndivyo akuavyo. So kama mji mkubwa wa Nairobi utaonyesha heshima hizi, inaonekana kaunti nyingine pia zitafuata mtindo na tutakuwa tukiona aibu.
Mimi naona values zimepotea, hakuna ile kudhamini mwenzako, kuona wacha mimi nikipata nimsaidie mwenzangu. Waona? Sasa naona ule utu umetutoka sisi.
Ningependa mikakati dhabiti iwekwe ili kuhakikisha kila jambo linatekelezwa. Kama tuseme kama ni huduma kwa wananchi, ihakikisha serikali inawahudumia jinsi wananchi wanavyotaka. Manake ni wao walipo